So, in 10 years of convening virtually, I've noticed a very common pattern that for people that are familiar with in-person convening and hosting and facilitation, or that are participants in things, that we take what we know how to do in person and we essentially think of what we're going to do virtually as some kind of a clone of that using virtual tools. So let's say you're planning a conference for 200 people that takes place over 2 days, a fairly typical sort of a thing you might do, right? If you're in the in-person realm, well, that's going to happen in a place, might be a building or a library or a conference center, but whatever that place is, a bunch of things, it can only hold so many people, and people are going to travel some distance to get there and suspend the rest of their lives. So it's going to have to happen over a discrete period of time. And 2 days is maybe, the right amount. You certainly wouldn't do it for 2 weeks, right? And that's how we think about an event like that. And whether it's a conference or a retreat or a meeting, any of these things, the same parameter holds. X number of people show up in a space that can, for X amount of time. And so you're essentially operating, at a single point that intersects those two dimensions, but that's actually a point on a curve. And this curve, which is known as the power law of participation, at least that's what Clay Shirky called it in his book, Here Comes Everybody, is actually how the most generative and dynamic stuff that's happened in virtual realms has operated. So if you think about, Linux as sort of the great success story, or Wikipedia, but it's actually true for any number of other things. What those success stories have involved is people being able to participate at all different levels of this curve. So you have a small number of people that might spend quite a bit of time. I mean, in this case, I'm sort of abstracting a conference out and saying, well, maybe there's something that lasts 2 weeks, but a small group of people are working really intensively there. Maybe those same 200 people, they might still get together over a 2-day period, but there might be things you can do with very large numbers of people very easily that are small amounts of time too, right? And the net contribution of something like that could be every bit as much important as something like this. This could provide all kinds of raw data, for example, or connections of who might these 200 people be. There's some of these 20,000. There's many different ways to think about, how you operate, how you design for this full curve, or at least something like 4 points on the curve, right? And this is not how we tend to think about reimagining our virtual engagements. We tend to just pick a point on the curve and try to do something that looks as much like what we would have done in person as possible, and it'll be okay. We wish we were in person. We may still be able to get our work done, or much of it. We may bring in a little bit of other virtual, whiz bang, or we notice how, wow, people from all over the world can show up instead of just people from, who could have traveled there. But we're still not operating within this full range of possibility. And that's just one of many patterns that I've seen over 10 years of virtual convening, where we have an opportunity to open up our design thinking and create radically different things that you wouldn't call it a conference anymore, right? If it had all these parameters, if it hit these 4 points, it would be a different thing, but it would accomplish the same core intentions and serve the same core needs that a conference might, in really interesting and dynamic ways. It's not a substitute for those 200 people getting together in a place. There's all kinds of magic that can happen in that form that won't necessarily happen here, but there's all kinds of stuff that can happen in this way that wouldn't happen if you just, lived in that small dot. I stopped the recording. Oh no, I stopped the share. Hold on.